Welcome to Quit to Win, the show where we explore the moments people have to let go of destructive pattern, limiting identity, and the internal battle to rebuild their life with purpose and clarity. Our today's guest is Gaylen Wilson, our heart transplant survivor, 20 years of sober former alcoholic, relationship author, erectile dysfunction advocate, certified thriving relationship coach, and founder of the Monument Mentor Institution with his wife, Hita. His life has been a series of forced reinvention, former stockbroker, computer repair man, field service technicians, and in 2004, a virus attacked his heart, leading to 3.5 years of fear, financial pressure, and the reality that without a transplant, he was going to die on June 19, 2008, hours before telling Hita he likely had only a month left. The transplant center called at that particular moment that made him realize staying was no longer an option. In his word, he realized his life has become bigger than merely surviving. He had years he was never guaranteed and could not waste that costing. It's really a pleasure and honor having the show.
It's an honor to be here, Ben.
Yeah. So, Gaylen, your life before the transplants was already a string of forced reinvention of farming, stockbroken, alcoholism, computer repairs, service. What did you have to quit believing before stability, before you could rebuild each time with the grant shifted?
Well, we go back to the years of the farm when I farmed all during my 20s,
Yeah.
and I also got married at 20 and had 4 kids by the time I was 26. So things were going wonderfully until my early 30s, when 2 of my last 3 years were crop failures because of the drought. And so I ended up having to file for farm bankruptcy at that point. And I had been such a driven young man to take care of my family. And so even though it wasn't my fault, I kind of internalized it as my fault. And I didn't have any emotional tools to deal with that. So I just did what the old Colorado farmer does and stuff it. And so then I went to Denver, the big city. We live in a little town of 7,500 in southeast Colorado. And so I went to Denver to make my fortune, and I got a job as a stockbroker. And so I was doing quite well at it. The New Yorkers loved my laid back southeast Colorado accent. And so I walked into work one Monday morning in mid-January of 1990 and found out that the little company I had been selling to all my clients, including $3,000 of my mother's money in it, had just filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and they were gone. The stock went to zero overnight. And so every one of my customers would not talk to me. They didn't want to hear from me anymore. And so that I can name that day as the day that I crawled inside a vodka bottle for 10 years. And so that I learned that's not the way to deal with it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, fortunately, I reinvented myself. I bounced around between jobs during the 90s and actually landed on a pretty good job in the late 90s that led to me becoming a traveling computer consultant in 2001, in January of 2001. And so, again, making more money than I'd ever made in my life, and I was doing really well. And then the planes flew into the building in September of 2001.
Cool.
That whole industry, the consulting industry, went down in ashes with those buildings. And so I ended up getting laid off in December. I spent the next 9 months on unemployment, but there just weren't any jobs to be had. And so I ended up having to go to work for Walmart as a cashier. And so between the alcoholism, my first wife was an angel. I mean, she was great. Even through the alcoholic years, she stuck by me. But with another disaster on us and the alcoholism and everything, that kind of spelled the end to that marriage. And so I met Heather in the fall of 2002, and we immediately developed an incredibly strong connection that lasted for the first 12 years until the virus attacked my heart in 2014. So
yeah, amazing. A whole lot of things to get a piece in here. And also, you get sober after the fallout from your stockbroker career fell apart. What did you have to quit telling yourself in order to get sober, rather than just wanting to be?
The way I ended up getting sober, and it ties really closely into what I've discovered about relationships now, is first I tried going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and they're this 12-step program that is quite famous. But I just really I saw a lot of men just hanging on to their sobriety with all their strength. Like it took all their strength to hang on to it. And, the whole counting exactly how many days you've been sober for 20
Yeah.
years. So you're kind of hanging on to that sobriety
Yeah.
pretty hard. And so what really kind of was the end of the Alcoholics Anonymous for me was I'd been going to a group that had a Army veteran that was in a wheelchair, and he had 21 years of sobriety. And I went into a meeting one Monday evening, and they informed us that he had fallen off the wagon, gotten drunk, and died of alcohol poisoning over the weekend.
Oh.
And so his white knuckling that sobriety had finally worn him out. And so fortunately I found a book called Rational Recovery, and I call it the thinking man's way to get sober, because in it explains that alcohol goes into your into your primal brain and makes itself an instinct, just like your need for food or need for water. Okay. And so once it's in there ingrained as an instinct, when you try to quit, your primal brain goes, "You're going to die, boy."
Yeah.
And so even though you aren't going to die, it thinks you're going to die because it's not getting its alcohol. And so once I understood that it was my primal brain driving me to go drink, I was able to start getting sober. And by the time I met Heather, I was to the point where I would go sober for 6 months and then have a weekend binge, and sober for 6 months and have a weekend binge. And I think that it was the extremely strong connection I made with her that eventually let me get off of the alcohol, because they say a lot of times an alcoholic, when he quits, will just switch addictions. Well, I switched my addiction to Heather.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were quite intimate quite often, and did a lot of eye gazing and soul connecting, and so it created this incredible bond. And so we had been traveling doing computer field service work. I hooked up with an outfit out of West Virginia that had a contract with AT&T, and AT&T had the contract with the USDA Farm Service Agency offices, the government offices that handle the farmers. And so they had the contract to provide the computer equipment. So this company sent us all over the United States, going to the county seats in each county in rural America. And our big trip was, we left July 14th or July 4th or 6th, I'm sorry, in a little Toyota Prius, which that's the very smallest car that Toyota makes. And I built a little 4-foot by 4-foot trailer kit with a car top carrier on it, and that's where we put our luggage. And so I took Heather and her two teenage 14 and 16-year-old daughters, and we drove through 35 states and did 250 offices in 31 states, 17,000 miles, or 17 weeks and 25,000 miles. And so one of the things that taught Heather and I was it taught us how to repair quickly, because it taught us how to say I'm sorry quickly, and how to say you're forgiven quickly, because there's nothing quite as miserable as driving hundreds of miles in a little bitty car with somebody you're angry with. And so that taught us really well how to repair quickly. And so we got back home from that trip. I got really sick around Christmas time of 2014, and I went into our little clinic. Again, we're a town of 7,500, quite a ways away from any of the cities in Colorado. So we don't have really good health care like the cities do. And so the physician's assistant that I saw said, "Mr. Wilson, you've got pneumonia. Here's some antibiotics." And he didn't send me for a chest x-ray, which I found out later that that's a big no-no. You always do a chest x-ray to verify pneumonia. And had he done that, I probably wouldn't have a heart transplant today. But anyway, so we had another 3.5-month trip planned in January. And so by the time it was time to go on that, the stuff coming up out of my lungs was clear. And so as we went on that trip, I just got weaker and weaker and weaker, to the point that 6 weeks into the trip, I had a little 5-kilo bag of tools that I could carry into the offices, and I'd have to set it down and suck air for a couple of minutes to tell them why I was there. And so we had a day off, and we were clearing Corpus Christi, Texas, which on the USA map, in about the center of the map, clear at the bottom, is Corpus Christi, right on the ocean. And so we walked in. I told them that I thought the pneumonia was coming back. They sent me for the chest x-ray, and they called me back that afternoon and said, "Mr. Wilson, you don't have pneumonia. You've got congestive heart failure. You need to get home to Colorado today." So that that virus that I had around Christmas time had attacked my heart, and then not getting it treated for that 6 weeks that I was traveling just increased the damage. And so poor Heather, she's from a town of 300 in Colorado, so she's a small town girl, and she had to drive me all the way home through all the big cities in Texas, the 1,000 miles back to southeast Colorado. And so we went into the little hospital here in town, and they basically sent me up to the big city, up to Colorado Springs. And when they got me in the ER up there, they did some tests. And a normal, healthy human heart puts out 50 to 60% out of the left chamber every time it beats. Mine was putting out 5.
Oh,
Yeah, I was banging on death's door pretty hard. And so they gave me some medicine, and they put in a internal defibrillator and pacemaker, and then got me well enough to send me home. And then by that summer, I was feeling pretty decent. My heart was putting out 30% instead of 5, which is still not 50 to 60, but at 30%, you can live a fairly decent life. And I even put a roof on my dad's house, 4,000 square foot roof on my dad's house that summer. And so, but then the next year, my heart started going into AFib, and that's where the top part doesn't beat in synchrony with the bottom part. And when your heart is already weak, and then it doesn't beat right, then you're a really sick man really quickly. And so poor Heather had to watch me dying in front of her eyes for 3.5 years. But during that time is when a lot of couples that don't have a strong relationship, that relationship will crumble. Either the sick person pushes their caregiver away, or the caregiver just gets so exhausted that they say, I can't do this anymore, and they leave. And so, but that never happened with us because of that strong bond we had made during that first 12 years. It was carrying us through. We had learned to repair quickly and learn to cling to each other and become each other's refuge. And so she never hinted that she wanted out. She stuck by me and nursed me right till the end. And I sat her down on June 19th of 2018 at 9:00 at night and told her, honey, I'm not going to be here in 2 to 3 months. We need to finish getting ready. We'd been to the mortuary once and needed to go back and make some final decisions. So, of course, she was bawling her eyes out because I had just told her I was dying. And a half an hour after I told her that, we got the call there was a heart available. And so somebody wasn't done with me yet. So I grabbed my little to-go bag like a pregnant couple keeps, and away we went to Denver. And we were having an eastern Colorado rain and hailstorm that night. So it was raining and hailing, and we had been given the deadline to get there at 1:30 in the morning, and we got there at 1:15. So we cut it pretty close.
yeah.
And so they wheeled me into the OR at 4:00 in the morning, and at 9:00 they wheeled me out, and I had a 38-year-old heart in that 61-year-old body. And so
Yeah.
they've given me 20 plus years with my soulmate that I shouldn't have had. And so I just feel so blessed on 2 fronts. One, the fact that I got the extra time with her.
Yeah.
And the other one is that I have become so one with her. It's gotten to the point where I wake up every morning and I go, how do I manage to love this woman more today than I did yesterday after
Amazing.
23.5 years?
Amazing. Which a whole lot to really learning here, and a whole lot of peace. And also, you and Heather went to surviving from the health crisis, building monuments now MVP, our relationship readiness platform. What did you have to quit about how you saw your own marriage before you could turn it into a system that helped other couples?
Okay. So one of the things Heather and I did, because I had this insane need to pay this blessing forward. So one of the things, and we had such an amazing relationship that I said, we need to share this with other people. And so I got into a course to become certified thriving relationship coaches, got Heather and I into it. And one of the first books we read was Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson. And in her book, she talks about attachment theory. And her attachment theory is, and this is where it ties into the alcohol instinct, because her attachment theory is that we were bred through thousands of years of prehistoric evolution to have an instinct for a strong attachment to our mates, that those that did not have that instinct back in prehistoric times didn't survive and their offspring didn't survive. So it got brought forward into modern humanity as an instinct. And so she went on to say that most of the fights we get into are not about what we're fighting about. It's because that instinct has detected a threat to the attachment and has thrown us into fight or flight mode. In other words, you're going to die, boy. And so once both parties get in fight or flight mode, the logical brain leaves the building. That's why you can't communicate your way out of fight or flight mode, because the lizard brains are in control, I call it. And so the lizard brains say things that aren't meant, things that are impossible to take back and cause permanent damage to a relationship sometimes. And so if you continue to stay in that fight or flight through a relationship, you just get further and further and further away from each other, and your nervous systems start not feeling safe with each other. And I've always said that there's no desire without nervous system safety. So what happens when you start destroying nervous system safety is you destroy your desire for each other. That's why you can get 4 or 5 years into a marriage and sex no longer happens. It's not because things got boring. It's because you kept damaging the nervous system to the point that the two nervous systems don't feel safe with each other. And so in applying this to our own marriage, I got with Heather and I got to thinking, how do we stop triggering that attachment instinct now that I knew about it? Just like back when I was trying to overcome the alcoholism, I learned to control that instinct. And so the first thing I came up with was, well, we need to watch what tone we talk to each other in. Because sometimes you talk to your loved one worse than you would any stranger, and that you get away with it because they love you, but you really don't get away with it because it's triggering that attachment instinct. And so they're more likely to go into fight or flight mode. And so Heather and I believe we're building this big, beautiful marble monument behind to our marriage. And each loving word or kind gesture, or especially when you make love with presence, you're building onto your monument. But each cruel word or cold shoulder or fight that you get into is like taking a hammer and chisel to your monument. And so we decided we wanted to fiercely protect our monument. That's the Monument Method Institute motto, is fiercely protect the monument. And so in fiercely protecting the monument, we decided to give each other permission. And permission is so important because you have to make yourself a team against the lizard brains instead of being enemies, because the fight or flight makes you enemies. Yeah. But if you become a team against that lizard brain, you're going to fiercely protect your monument. And so we decided to give each other permission to call each other out when we were using tone. Like, honey, did you really need to say that way? And so that helped some, but we were still getting into the fights that everybody gets into. And so I got to thinking further, how do we stop getting into fight or flight mode to stop the fighting? And so I came up with the idea that we give each other a sacred word, and ours is monument. So anytime one of us sees the other one heading towards the monument with the hammer and chisel, in other words, when we've said something that's going to start a fight, the other one calls monument. And again, we agreed to stop the fight right there. But you don't stop it and then separate, because if you stop it and separate, then when you come back together, you're still right in fight or flight mode, and you're right back at it. And so what we learned that would stop the fight and stop us from getting in fight or flight was we turned towards each other, approached, and embraced each other's arms and gazed into each other's eyes and patched that little spot on the monument that we just chipped out. And the science behind that is that when you gaze into your lover's eyes, it goes into that primal brain where that instinct lives and says, your attachment's safe. You can stand down. And so the nervous system stands down out of fight or flight mode. The logical brain returns to the building, and you can logically discuss what you were getting ready to have a big fight about. And usually it was nothing. And so that's once you start practicing this, that we call that the monument moment. Once you start practicing it, and it does take practice, because we seem to be wired to want to fight with each other. Yeah. And so it takes practice, but once you start practicing it, pretty soon you're hardly ever fighting. And because as soon as one says something that's going to start the other fight, the other one calls monument to remind us that we're we want to fiercely protect our monument, that our monument's more important than our ego and more important than winning a fight. And so we come together, repair quickly, and that creates an incredible bond between a couple. And once that starts happening regularly, guess what? Your nervous system starts feeling safe. So what did I say a while ago? There's no desire without nervous system safety. Once your nervous system starts feeling safe with each other, all of a sudden your desire just skyrockets.
The other questions I actually intend to ask, and really robust, and the fact that having that particular strategic moment, we're calling for monument, just make you just take a break instead of going on having that divisions and a whole lot of stuff. But this is really amazing. Also, for my audience who would love to reach out, I'll connect with you, explore the topic more and get to connect with you. How can they reach out and where's the best platform?
I've got my website is monumentmethodinstitute.com, and my books are available on Amazon. Website, if you scroll down, you'll see a link that says West African Distributor, and that will take you to his page. His name is Pope. His actual name is Tafora Emmanuel, but he goes by Pope. So if you go to his, I've made a special page on my website just for him. You can go pick which books you want, and you can contact him with WhatsApp, and you can pay him with Momo to get the books. And I've made pretty decent prices for West Africa.
Thank you so much. This is really robust, and definitely for my audience who love to reach out, if you're in West Africa, if you're in the US, various links will be actually more like added to the show notes for you to be able to get a book or through those particular links. Thank you so much, Gaylen. Thank you. A reminder that remarriage isn't just surviving, it's what you choose to build with the years you are in guarantee is exactly what this audience needs. I remember that staying in survival mode is never the safe option, but building sanctuary is. Once again, it's a pleasure and honor having you on the show, Gaylen.
It was an honor to be here, Benaiah.